What if your child's laughter was enough to get you accused of witchcraft? What if your morning prayer became a death sentence? In the summer of 1600, in the heart of Munich, one family stood on a scaffold branded as heretics, traitors, and something even darker. Their youngest son was 10. Their crime: sharing bread, praying out loud, whispering stories at night. But in a city ruled by fear, that was all it took. What happened next was so brutal, so humiliating, so ritualistic, that even the city itself tried to bury the memory. The youngest was forced to watch. The daughter was told to confess or see them all broken. But this isn't just a story of cruelty. It's a story of defiance, of a family that chose silence over betrayal, of a ruler who turned judgment into spectacle, and of a moment, just one, where mercy shocked an entire generation into stillness. Stay until the end, because the most haunting part is what they did after the trial, what they became, and how their story changed a city forever. The night air in Munich carried a metallic tang, as if the very stones underfoot had absorbed the memory of spilled lifeblood. Lanterns swung in uneven rhythms, casting distorted shadows that danced across the narrow alleys. It was the summer of 1600, and the city's heartbeat pulsed with a tension that neither hymn nor hammer could soothe. No one knew when the rumor had first taken shape, perhaps in a whispered prayer or a furtive glance exchanged in the market square. By the time the flicker of fear reached the ears of the authorities, it had already grown into a living thing, twisting the simplest doubts into accusations of heresy and treachery. Families who once shared laughter at tavern tables now watched their neighbors with suspicion. In the hush before dawn, it was said, a single informant's words could condemn a household. Among those called by fate's cruel summons was Paulus Gimpl, a peddler whose life had never escaped the margins of society. His children Anna, robust with youth's stubborn glow Humphrey, whose quick hands could fix a broken wheel, or a weary heart Michael, quiet and watchful, and 10-year-old Hansel, whose laughter once rang brighter than any bell, felt the weight of their name before they could understand its meaning. They were poor but honest, outsiders by birth, branded from infancy. In the eyes of law and law, that alone was enough to mark them as wolves in sheep's clothing. It began in autumn of 1599, when a chance quarrel sparked a poisoned whisper, a debt unsettled, a grudge hidden behind curtains, an enemy, perhaps, seeking to elevate his own standing by sending the Gimpls plummeting. Authorities, eager to demonstrate their zealous loyalty to the Counter-Reformation, seized on the rumor as proof of deeper conspiracies. To them, the smallest ember of dissent deserved nothing less than full-scale purge. Under the cloak of night, soldiers arrived at the Gimpl abode. Heavy boots crushed brittle leaves. The hinges groaned under uninvited force. Paulus rose at the clamor, but only to meet blindfolded hands and the snap of iron manacles. Anna pleaded, her voice a sharp blade against the darkness. Humphrey struggled, his arms like ropes of muscle, but he was no match for the surprise that drove him to his knees. Michael slipped silent as a shadow, clutching Hansel close, but even their stealth could not save them from the echoing orders that branded them traitors. The journey to the Munich fork, off known in hushed tones as the Duke's own chamber of reckoning, was measured not in miles but in dread. Each tree-lined road seemed to curve inward, as though the woods themselves conspired to trap their prey. When the gates of the courtyard finally loomed, iron bars gleamed under torchlight, and the shape of the executioner's scaffold glinted like a cruel promise. Inside, fate donned the robes of Maximilian I himself. The Duke, whose name inspired both loyalty and dread, had taken personal interest in the case. He saw in these wandering souls an opportunity, a lesson to be carved into the memories of every peasant, every merchant, every bishop in Bavaria. If the Gimpls fell, they would fall as scapegoats for a wider war, one fought not only with swords and sermons, but with fear. Yet fear, once unleashed, can slip its bindings. The first interrogations began with whispers. Could a mother truly conspire to harm her own child? Could a boy of 10 hold the cunning to join sorcery? In the damp cells, under the glare of lantern-lit corridors, flesh yielded more easily than resolve. Each plea, Each cry fed the machinery of confession, instruments of pain, devices whose names struck terror into the stoutest hearts were employed not to uncover truth, but to ensure agreement with the tale the authorities were determined to hear. A single night stretched into days filled with endless questioning. The walls, slick with cold and remorse, bore witness to parents torn between protecting their kin and surviving the ordeal. Anna's defiant gaze, once unbreakable, flickered as she faced the unspoken choice to betray her father's name or to endure a verdict worse than death. Around her, the doctrine of repentance became a performance, scripted by those who held the rope's end. Outside, Munich's populace awaited spectacle. Murmurs of hundreds already condemned spread through taverns and churches, a carnival of judgment that would cleanse the land of impurity. Yet as the day of reckoning approached, the 29th of July, the city's fervor began to waver. Whispers turned to questions. Had the Gimpls truly conspired against the Duke? Or were they victims of envy, of a system too eager to find enemies? In the hush before mid-morning, when sunlight burned the morning mist away, the stage was set. Timber rose in cruel symmetry, the Duke's crest loomed above, a reminder that mercy was optional. But as the crowd pressed forward, driven by curiosity as much as by conviction, the air itself felt charged. Somewhere between prayer and prophecy, doubt took root. This moment, teetering between assured ruin and the possibility of something unnamed, would define the line between justice and vengeance. As the Gimpls were led into the open square, every eye turned, every heart quickened. What happened next would echo across generations, a testament to the fragility of truth when wielded as a weapon. So begins the tale that unfolds not in chapters, but as a single, relentless journey through fear and hope, agony and defiance. Listen closely. The stones of Munich, stained and scarred, have much to tell. Oak drifted over the city's rooftops long before dawn, carrying with it the scent of brandished iron and whispered sermons. In every chapel, a new decree had been etched into the creaking pews. Any sign of dissent, spoken word, furtive glance, or unguarded prayer was an affront to both God and sovereign. The council in Rome had dispatched envoys to Bavaria, urging the eradication of heresy, a stubborn weed choking the vine of faith. Local magistrates, armed as much by zeal as by law, took this charge as a divine mandate. Beneath the vaulted arches of St. Peter's Cathedral, candles flickered beside frescoes of martyrs. Parishioners who knelt each Sunday believed their salvation lay in obedience. Many could recite the penalties for blasphemy more readily than the Lord's Prayer, yet curiosity and fear entwined whenever questions of mercy arose. Could the Almighty truly condone torture in the name of repentance? The statute spoke of purging evil, but left silent the fate of those condemned without proof. On the outskirts of Munich, peasants gathered at the banks of the Isar River to barter goods and gossip. Shepherds trimmed their flocks, mothers churned butter, and traders stacked crates of vinegar and oil. All spoke in guarded tones of the Duke's recent proclamations, inspections of every household, mandatory confession of thoughts considered suspect, and strict curfews after Vespers. Messengers rode from hamlet to hamlet, carrying lantern-light lanterns to shadow every hearth. In these same villages, superstition coiled around the daily round like ivy. Midwives were watched for unnatural remedies, while woodcutters told tales of women who whispered to trees and men who tamed storms with a glance. Even the boldest travelers paused at crossroads, offering coins to saints carved in the local shrines. For many, the boundary between devout faith and condemned heresy was a thread so fine that a single misstep could unravel an entire life. It was in this climate where law and rumor held equal sway that the Gimpl family lived their simple, itinerant existence. Paulus, skilled at degrees that lent him neither respect nor respite, moved from market town to market town, trading trinkets and tales. His wife, Anna, kept watchful eyes on the children, teaching them the Psalms, while reminding them to speak only what the Duke's edicts permitted. Yet every shared smile risked suspicion, every idle story could be twisted into sedition, and so the wheels turned, unseen but inexorable. One by one, The legal wheels of Counter-Reformation justice spun into motion, creaking with bureaucratic purpose. The fate of those who tumbled beneath their weight was seldom recorded in hymnals or annals, only in the echo of manacles and the stain left upon battered conscience. For the Gimpls, this was no distant threat. It was the very framework of the world they inhabited, a world poised on the edge of irrevocable collapse. Dawn's pale light revealed the Gimpl children huddled in a corner of the damp cell, their faces drawn with hunger and bewilderment. Anna wrapped her arms around 10-year-old Hansel, whispering hymns to still the tremor in his voice. Humphrey bent close to his sister, tracing constellations on the wall's rough stone with a finger that shook like a fallen leaf. Michael stood guard at the door, his silence a shield against the nameless dread that seeped through the cracks. Memories of better days surfaced like ghosts, Paulus teaching Michael to read the runic marks on old coins, Anna singing lullabies by the hearth as the firelight played over Hansel's golden curls, Humphrey's hearty laughter booming through open fields. Each recollection was a precious ember in the darkness, a reminder that life once held warmth and possibility beyond suspicion. Yet hope was a fragile thing. The rattling of chains and distant shouts served as grim reminders of the machinery outside. Guards argued about the timing of the next interrogation, tossing scraps of gossip. That Duke Maximilian would attend personally, that newer, harsher devices had arrived, that a public confession was demanded by councillors eager to display the moral fortitude of Bavarian rule. In the hush that followed, Anna pressed a kiss to her father's cheek, her eyes meeting his through the gloom. No words passed between them, for the bond of blood spoke louder than any pleading prayer. Still, in that moment, they formed a silent pact to endure, to protect whoever they could, and to keep alive the truth that no decree, no whispering rumor, could fully extinguish. Beyond the iron door, the city stirred to its early tasks: bakers stoking ovens, blacksmiths hammering fresh blades, priests ascending pulpits for the morning mass. Each carried on as if unknowing of the tragedy unfolding behind castle walls. And yet, for those few walls held not only prisoners, but the fragile hopes of a family framed for a crime they did not commit. As benches were prepared in the courtyard and torches readied for the day's grim theatre, the Gimpls braced with whatever small grace remained. In the heart of Munich, under the gaze of a ruler who wielded fear as a weapon, the stage was nearly set. But somewhere between captive breaths and the distant toll of church bells, the true story of the Gimpls began to awaken, a story that would test the boundaries of faith, loyalty, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. And so, with hearts heavy yet unbroken, they stepped from the shadow of their cell into a world balanced on the edge of mercy and retribution, unaware that their voices, once silenced, were soon to resonate beyond the timber scaffold into the very conscience of Bavaria itself. A sudden hush fell over the square as the Gimpl family appeared at the threshold, their forms haloed by the morning sun. The scaffold's wooden beams towered like silent sentinels, each scar and notch a reminder of past fates. Anna's pulse hammered beneath her ribs. She glanced at her siblings, Humphrey's jaw set in grim determination, Michael's hands clenched, and Hansel's wide eyes reflecting both terror and awe. Paulus stood at the center, his shoulders straight despite the iron cuffs that bit into his wrists. In that shared glance, the family found a fleeting strength. Below the Duke's balcony, rows of townsfolk pressed forward, their faces turned expectant. Some bore expressions of righteous indignation, others wore mere curiosity, as if attending a pageant rather than the final reckoning of human souls. Among them, cloaked figures murmured in low tones, churchmen in fine robes, magistrates with clipped notepads, and whisperers whose names would vanish into the fog of history. A bell tolled, its clear ring slicing through the murmurs. The Duke's herald stepped forward, unfurling a scroll that crackled with age. In measured tones, he recited the charges: conspiracy against the realm, pacts with forbidden forces, and heinous sacrileges. Each word echoed like a steel arrow, embedding itself in the hearts of the accused. No defense was permitted, mercy was available only through confession. Humphrey's voice wavered first as a guard pressed a lance of accusation against his chest, demanding names of accomplices. He swallowed, pain flickering across his face, not from the cold iron, but from the impossible choice before him. Anna felt the echo of his fear in her own throat, but she forced herself to stand taller, gaze fixed on the herald's lips, as if his words were a scripture to be unraveled. Suddenly, the herald snapped the scroll shut, and the guard seized Paulus, dragging him toward a dais where a rack lay ominously in place. Anna sprang forward, but an officer's gaunted hand caught her by the shoulder, twisting her backward. Hansel cried out, his small body quivering, while Michael lunged, only to be restrained by two soldiers, who bore him away, his struggling form swallowed by the crowd's edge. From the corner of her eye, Anna saw the device, a twisted frame of beams with leather straps and a windlass wheel. Even from this distance, she could almost hear the groans that would soon emanate from it. As her father's foot touched the platform, she risked a glance upward and met the steely gaze of Duke Maximilian himself. In that moment, Anna realized that this was no mere trial. It was performance, terror meant to sculpt the city's will. With a single turn of the wheel, agony would speak louder than protest. And in that instant, beneath the gaze of God and Sovereign, the Gimpls' fate would be written in flesh. And the low torchlight, the cracks in the rough stone walls, seemed less like prison and more like the seams of a worn quilt, places where memories had seeped through, binding past and present. Anna lowered her voice to a whisper learned from countless nights huddled around a dying hearth. She recounted the first time Paulus taught Michael to read the letters carved into an old pilgrim's token, and how Humphrey had chased Hansel through sunlit meadows, their laughter weaving a bright tapestry across the hills of Bavaria. For a moment, the machinery of accusation, the echoing footsteps, the rattling keys, the distant murmur of officials faded behind the rhythm of their shared history. Words of gentle reproach passed between siblings, Michael's steady reminder that hope could outlast darkness, Humphrey's vow that no decree could sever the bond forged in their mother's womb, Anna's promise to speak only truth. Even under the sternest gaze, Paulus bowed his head, his rough voice steady as a plough cutting furrows. He reminded them that their story was etched not on scrolls of authority, but on the hearts they carried. When they demand our shame, we will answer with our truth, he said, pressing a gentle kiss to Anna's forehead. Anna, drawing strength from his resolve, lifted her chin and met his eyes, finding in them the reflection of her own determination. In that silent chamber, the Gimpls were no longer accused or condemned. They were family standing shoulder to shoulder against a world determined to break them apart. And as they clasped each other's hands, an unspoken promise took root, that whatever trials awaited, their unity and the truths they held dear would echo louder than any proclamation of guilt. Yet even within that unity, fear shimmered at the edges like heat mirages on sun-scorched fields. Anna's heart pounded with a fierce rhythm, each beat a testament to the love that chained her to her kin. She felt the tremor of Humphrey's grip as he tightened his fist around her arm, a silent plea that they remain strong. Michael's eyes, usually so calm, glistened with unshed tears, reflecting the flicker of torchlight as if he beheld a dying star. And little Hansel, pressed between them, clenched his mother's robe so tightly that the fabric rippled under his grip, his small knuckles turning white. Paulus drew a stiff breath, feeling the weight of leadership settle upon his shoulders like a mantle too heavy for his lean frame. He caught Hansel's eye and offered the boy a tender smile, an oasis in the desert of despair. "Remember," he whispered, voice barely louder than the hush around them, "we carry our own light." The words hung like sparks in the air, igniting a glimmer of bravery even as the walls closed in. A distant bell tolled once, an unyielding chime that seeped through the stones and into their chests. The signal had come. Still, in that fleeting moment, before the door's heavy bolt slid back, the Gimpls shared one final breath of calm, each heartbeat momentarily resonating in harmony, a fragile chord of defiance against the encroaching dark. The heavy plank of the door groaned as it shifted, releasing a draft that smelled of wet stone and distant embers. A drop of moisture traced its path down Anna's temple, mingling with the salt of her tear-stained cheek. She inhaled, tasting the faint tang of iron on her lips, an echo of the chains that once bound them. Humphrey's breath came in short, measured gusts, each exhale a soft hiss, like wind slipping through cracked walls. Michael's palm pressed against Anna's back, the subtle warmth of his skin, a reminder of life beyond this threshold. In that brief aperture of sound and scent, the family remained suspended, threads woven together by love and fear, stronger than the brittle wood before them. They could hear the distant murmur of voices beyond, a child's sob muted by distance, the low hum of officials consulting parchments, and the faint scrape of leather boots. Each noise was a reminder that the world awaited, indifferent yet relentless. Anna's fingertips brushed the rough grain of the door, her skin sensitive to every ridge and splinter. She closed her eyes, letting memories fill her, sunlight dancing on barley fields, the gentle curve of her mother's lullaby, the soft rustle of leaves under barefoot wanderings. In that swirl of recollection, her fear found shape, not as a crushing weight, but as a shard driving her resolve. Humphrey shifted to stand between Anna and the opening, his frame broad yet lanky, as if he could once again haul his family from despair by sheer force of will. Michael's gaze lifted to the gap, his eyes reflecting both trepidation and fierce loyalty. And Hansel, reaching up with delicate fingers, touched Anna's hand, a silent plea that no matter what awaited beyond this door, they would face it together. As the bolt slid free and the door creaked wider, Anna felt her heartbeat thrum like a drumroll, anticipation and dread entwined in a single rhythm. The torchlight beyond spilled in, carving golden slashes across the cold stone floor, and in that golden glow, the Gimpl family stepped forward, their silhouettes merging into a single shape, a testament to the quiet strength born of shared blood and unspoken vows. Their footsteps echoed on the cobblestones as they emerged from the cell's gloom, each step a drumbeat announcing their passage into the waking world beyond. The courtyard yawned before them, wide and scarred by decades of executions, its stones bearing dark stains, like bruises on the landscape. The crowd's murmur shifted to a hush, then to an expectant silence, as Anna's boots clicked against the damp ground. A shaft of morning light struck Paula's gaunt face, illuminating lines etched by years of hardship. He glanced at his children. Anna recognized the flicker of doubt in Michael's eyes, the tightening of Humphrey's jaw as he readied himself to defend. Hansel's small hand found hers, and Anna squeezed it, passing on a pulse of calm. At the far end, a table draped in black cloth stood beside an iron cage, its bars cold and unyielding. Two men in sable robes consulted thick ledgers, their quills poised. One lifted his gaze, adjusting spectacles that glinted like distant stars. When his eyes met Anna's, she felt a chill, as though the man could peer into her very soul. The air smelled of damp straw and spilled wine, mingled with the acrid tang of fear. A nearby torch sputtered, its flame quivering as if recoiling from the scene. Birds stirred in the rafters overhead, their wings beating a restless tattoo. Anna breathed in deeply, drawing the scents into her lungs and exhaling a silent vow. She would not let this place break them. Without a word, the officers beckoned them forward. As they crossed the threshold of accusation, the world narrowed to the space between the ledger and their hearts. In that charged moment, each carried an ember of truth, fragile yet bright enough to challenge the darkness that sought to swallow them whole. Anna felt the weight of every gaze upon her, as if each spectator's eyes pressed into her skin, countless tiny needles. In her mind, a whirlwind of memories collided: her mother's gentle admonitions, the warmth of spring meadows under bare feet, the curious glint in Michael's eyes when he discovered a hidden coin. She drew on these recollections, as if they were threads weaving a tapestry of resilience. Every remembered word of her father's teachings about honesty became a shield, every echo of Humphrey's laughter a spark that lit the darkness within her. For Paulus, the moment tested the very core of his being. His life had been one of steady toil and humble pride, shaped by calloused hands and honest labor. Now, standing at the edge of condemnation, he recalled the first time he held Anna in his arms, her tiny fingers curling around his rough forefinger. He remembered the nights when he whispered reassurance into her ear during thunderstorms, and the time he taught Humphrey to see the world not as a place of fear, but of unending possibilities. These memories fueled a quiet defiance, though his body trembled. His spirit stood firm like an ancient oak rooted against the storm of injustice. Humphrey's protective instinct burned like a forge in his chest. He saw himself as his family's bulwark, a role he assumed since boyhood when he mended his siblings' scraped knees or warded off mocking neighbors. Underneath his broad shoulders lay a heart tender to their fears and dreams. Now, as officers ushered them forward, he felt the tension in his muscles coalesce into purpose, to guard his family's hope, even if it meant facing the harshest of trials alone. Michael's stillness concealed a storm of thoughts. Observant since birth, he had watched the world with cautious curiosity, often reading meaning in the smallest gestures, a furrowed brow, a flicker of light in a stranger's eye. His brother's oath of protection and Anna's fierce resolve wove together in his mind with the words of the Psalms she taught him. He was determined to be the quiet anchor that steadied their shared resolve, to remind them that even in silence, the heart could shout its truth. Little Hansel, his small hand clasped in Anna's, sensed the tremor beneath her calm exterior. In his 10 years, he had learned that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. His eyes, wide with confusion and wonder, held a spark that neither iron bars nor braided rumors could extinguish. He believed, with a child's certainty, that love flickering bright as firelight could outshine any darkness. Together, they advanced, each step a quiet declaration of who they were, not conspirators, but a family bound by love, memory, and unbreakable resolve. In that moment, their individual fears transformed into a shared courage, of mosaic of hope that glowed against the shadows of accusation. Inside the ledger's heavy weight, Anna sensed not only condemnation, but also the possibilities hidden between lines, tiny gaps where truth might slip through. She watched the scribe's quill hover, hesitating above the page. The faint scent of oak resin from the desk mingled with the earthy aroma of parchment, grounding her in the moment. Each breath she drew tasted of clarity and resolve. Paulus felt a tremor not in his limbs, but in his conviction. He had carried the burden of providing for his family through long winters and lean harvests. This challenge felt no different in essence, though far harsher in form. He detected the subtle twitch of the magistrate's pen, as if the man struggled between duty and doubt. It was a reminder that power itself was subject to human frailty. Humphrey, ever the guardian, observed the shadows cast by the ledger's stand. He noted the way the light refracted through the iron bars of the nearby cage, painting stripes of dark and brightness across the courtyard. To him, every interplay of light and dark spoke of hidden truths waiting to emerge. He held that vision in his mind like a talisman against despair. Michael, attuned to unspoken currents, felt the air's tension thicken, a silence that screamed louder than any shout. He smelled the faintest trace of spilled ink, a reminder that stories, once written, could never be erased. His gaze flicked to Hansel, whose small frame quivered with anticipation. Michael offered him a subtle nod, sharing strength in a silent language that needed no words. Hansel, standing at the threshold of childhood and the unknown, felt his pulse sync with his family's steady rhythm. The courtyard's mosaic of stone and blood-red stains told stories he could not yet read, but he sensed their weight. Yet beneath that heaviness, he found a spark his family's love, a light that no ledger, no charge, could dim. As the magistrate finally lowered his quill and looked to Duke Maximilian's crest above, the Gimpls held their breath. In that pregnant pause, each felt the full force of their unity and the fragile flicker of hope they carried into the heart of accusation. Behind the magistrate's stern front, a tempest raged. His fingers, long stained with ink, trembled as he lifted the ledger once more, though his gaze lingered on the Gimpls with something more piercing than accusation. Was it doubt, pity, or fear of his own soul's reckoning? Each scratch of his quill against parchment reminded him of his youth, when he first swore an oath to uphold justice. He had believed then that justice was clear and absolute, etched in laws that left no room for mercy. Yet here, confronted by the fragile figures before him, he felt those convictions fracture like brittle ice. He recalled the face of his own daughter, not much older than Anna, teaching her to read the scriptures by candlelight. He remembered the sound of her laughter, so like Hansel's, and the warmth of her small hand in his. A pang of guilt struck him. Had he once promised to protect the innocent, and now he was poised to condemn a family whose only crime might be poverty and circumstance? As he raised his quill to inscribe the next line, the magistrate swallowed hard, the rooms and shadows pressing in. In the hush, he could almost hear a different voice, a quiet reminder that true justice seeks truth, not blood. The ledger before him was a record not only of charges, but of human lives. Was it his place to decide whose lives were worth saving? The question echoed like a bell tolling in an empty chamber. With a resolve born of inner conflict, he exhaled slowly. His next words would shape their fate, yet also define his own. For in the quiet turmoil of his heart, the magistrate understood that he would never escape the weight of that choice. The magistrate's quill hovered as he cleared his throat, the silence amplifying the quickened breaths of family and crowd alike. He lifted his gaze, beginning the questioning in a voice both measured and heavy with the weight of his own uncertainty. "Paulus Gimpl," he intoned, voice echoing against stone, "you stand accused of consorting with those who would undermine the Duke's authority. Speak plainly. Have you ever exchanged words or tokens with known heretics?" The courtyard held its breath. Paulus straightened, feeling the eyes of every attendant press into his back like needles. He drew from the well of memory and conviction, recalling the countless nights he spent as a simple hearth, teaching his children compassion and truth. "I have shared no such counsel," Paulus answered, voice firm though low. "My only fellowship has been with these my family bound by blood and honest labor." A ripple ran through the crowd, a murmur swelling into a chorus of doubtful whispers. Some faces softened with pity, others hardened with suspicion, as townsfolk exchanged uneasy glances, their faith in the magistrate's certainty wavering. "Anna, daughter of Paulus, witnesses claim you guided your family in forbidden rites. Is this so?" A murmur rippled through the audience, the magistrate's brow furrowing. She scribbled in the ledger. The next question came swift and sharp, aimed at Anna. "Anna, daughter of Paulus, witnesses claim you guided your family in forbidden rites. Is this so?" Anna's heart pounded. She swallowed, remembering her mother's hymn about light-piercing darkness. She met the magistrate's eyes, steeling herself. "I have taught them only prayers taught in every chapel," she said, voice steady. "No right beyond our faith." A hush fell, sharper than before, as the crowd leaned in, the weight of her words hanging in the space. A lone voice, an old woman wrapped in a threadbare shawl, whispered, "She speaks with honesty in her eyes," and the sentiment spread through sympathetic knots. The magistrate paused, ink quill dripping. He then turned to Humphrey. "Humphrey Gimpl, you who stand ready to defend. Did you seek to corrupt this child?" He gestured to Hansel with talk of spirits and shadows. Humphrey's jaw clenched. He glanced at young Hansel, then at his father. "I have only shared stories of our travels, nothing more." His gaze challenged the magistrate. A silent vow to protect. Murmurs turned excited, some in admiration of his fierce defense, others in scornful laughter at what they saw as childish bravado. A young man spat to one side, muttering, "Empty tales." Finally, Michael faced scrutiny. His solitude and quietude made him an enigma to the assembly. "Michael Gimpl, did you witness your family in acts against the realm?" Michael inhaled deeply, the words of a psalm on his lips. "I witnessed only love and hardship." He spoke softly. "No treachery." The tension snapped as if a cord had been cut. In the crowd, some reached to clutch loved ones, moved by his gentle conviction, while others shifted uneasily, uncertain whether compassion or condemnation would prevail. The air trembled as the magistrate closed the ledger. Around the edges of the crowd, a stout baker with flour-dusted hands pressed forward, his stern brow softening as he exchanged a glance with a sobbing wife beside him. Her tears spoke of shared fear more than guilt. Nearby, a silk-clad merchant, his fingers still clinking with coins, frowned in silent conflict, as though weighing the cost of justice against his own conscience. A weathered shepherd, perched on the steps of a fountain, gripped the hilt of a knife as if to defend these strangers, the Gimpls, from unseen wrongs. His rough voice captured in a single, sharp intake of breath, and atop a wooden crate. A schoolmaster folded his arms, his eyes scanning each family member's face with the discerning gaze of one who knows the power of words. In his look lay both sorrow for the accused and regret for the stories he would soon be forced to unteach. Nearby, a grey-haired priest in simple robes cupped his hands around his mouth, whispering a fervent prayer for the innocent, his lined face betraying a conflict between doctrine and compassion. At the edge of the square, a merchant's clerk, his ledger abandoned at his side, watched with knitted brow, torn between loyalty to his employer and the stirring of compassion he felt for the Gimpls. A young noble woman, her silk gown a swirl of emerald and gold, pressed forward on tiptoe, her eyes shining with youthful idealism. She clutched a small token of flight, ready to plead for mercy if given the chance. And at a makeshift barrier of carts, a hardened soldier, sword in one hand and helmet tucked under his arm, stood motionless, his stance rigid, but his gaze softening as he witnessed the family's courage. The crowd's clamor rose in anticipation, voices rising like a tide ready to crash. Suddenly, a flurry of trumpets cut through the murmur, announcing Duke Maximilian's arrival. The magistrate stepped aside as the Duke, resplendent in embroidered crimson and velvet, descended the staircase with measured grace. Maximilian's gaze swept the assembly, his eyes gleamed with the calculation of a hawk. He paused before the Gimpls, his presence a drawbridge between accusation and authority. Silence fell deeper than before. Even the wine seemed to hesitate. "Have mercy, my lord," a tremulous voice called from the back. A widow, whose husband had perished in service to the Duke. Her plea rippled through the crowd, emboldening others. A miller's son, a butcher's wife, a schoolboy hiding behind a pillar, each lifting a voice for compassion. The Duke's brow furrowed. He placed a gloved hand on the magistrate's shoulder, steering him forward. "Read the next count," he ordered, voice both velvet and steel. The magistrate's quill resumed its march. Count IV. Conspiracy to undermine public order through clandestine gatherings and incantations. Maximilian's lips curved into a faint smile as he addressed the accused. "Speak now." Gimpls, speak without fear of retribution. Paulus inhaled, summoning the calm he had nurtured in his children. "Your Grace," he began, voice resonant across the square, "we have gathered only to share bread, prayer, and stories of honest travail. Our only conspiracy is to remain bound by love, even when shadows fall." The Duke studied Paulus, then shifted his gaze to Anna. "Daughter, what say you of these gatherings?" Anna stepped forward, her figure slender, but unbowed beneath the morning sun. "Sire, those moments of fellowship kept our hearts from despair. We knelt in modest chapels, we dined on simple fare, and we spoke only of hope and duty." A murmur of approval spread, an undercurrent of empathy building among the crowd. The Duke nodded thoughtfully, his fingers tapping lightly on the pommel of his sword. Before the moment stretched into tension, Maximilian raised a hand. "I have heard enough," he declared, voice ringing like a bell. "The true conspiracy here, fear itself, fear that turns neighbor against neighbor, that sees heresy in the prayers of the humble." A gasp rippled through the square. The magistrate's quill clattered to the stone floor. The Duke's gaze softened as he turned to the crowd. "Let it be known, Bavaria's strength lies in its unity, in the faith of its people. I pardon the Gimpl family of all charges, yet let their ordeal stand as a lesson that true vigilance guards not only against false doctrines, but against the tyranny of suspicion." A cheer rose hesitantly, then swelled into a roar of relief and triumph. Tears streamed down faces, hardened by doubt. Hands found one another, clasping in solidarity. The Gimpls, released from their bonds, embraced beneath the Duke's watchful eye, a tableau of human spirit restored. But even in that moment of grace, Anna sensed a subtle shift. The stones of Munich, weary from bearing witness to suffering, seemed to sigh in relief, yet their fractures remained. The true work of healing was only beginning among hearts and minds. Whispered prayers and shared stories. And as the crowd dispersed, carrying the news like ripples on water, the Gimpl family stepped free from accusation, their unity now a beacon against the shadows that once threatened to consume them. In the days that followed, the square lay silent under the sun's watchful gaze, as if absorbing the tremors of change. Inns and taverns hummed with fresh life, patrons raising tankards to the Gimpls' improbable deliverance. Yet beneath the clamor of celebration, hushed conversations lingered, merchants trading stories of courage, church elders debating the Duke's unprecedented clemency, and artists sketching the family's likeness, for whispered leaflets passed hand to hand. Anna walked the old city gates with Hansel perched on her hip, the child's vivid laughter mingling with the wind. She watched a street musician's bandage being removed by a curious crowd, a reminder that wounds, like memories, heal at their own pace. Humphrey lent a hand at the blacksmith's forge, earning honest wages, while spreading news of renewed faith in communal bonds. Michael offered silent comfort at the cathedral steps, his quiet presence a balm to those still bruised by suspicion. Paula stood beneath the frescoed arch of the Forkhof, tracing the Duke's crest with reverent fingers. He wondered if the mercy shown would root deeper than fear had grown. In his pocket, he pressed a new pilgrim's token engraved with the date of their pardon and vowed to carry its story far beyond Bavaria's borders. Across the Isar River, the baker who had pleaded for mercy taught his apprentices to fold prayers into each loaf. Softly reciting Anna's words of hope, the young noblewoman delivered her token of flight to a small convent, her idealism tempered but unshaken, planting seeds of compassion in cloistered hearts. The shepherd carved a small wooden figurine, a likeness of a family united, to remind any passerby that justice and empathy must walk hand in hand. But as seasons shifted and winter's chill crept over the land, murmurs of trial and pardon faded into the rhythm of everyday life. New edicts arrived, and some magistrates reverted to old habits. Eyes narrowed for signs of dissent. Yet the Gimpls' story endured past, from mother to child, from pew to marketplace, as testament that truth, when spoken in unison, can outlast even the sharpest blade of suspicion. And somewhere, in the quiet columns of the Duke's court, the ledger of accusations lay closed, its pages forever marked by a tale of family, faith, and the fragile bomb of mercy. And somewhere, in the quiet columns of the Duke's court, the ledger of accusations lay closed, its pages forever marked by a tale of family, faith, and the fragile bomb of mercy. But stories, even those resolved, seldom rest. As spring returned to the valleys, word of the Gimpl family's ordeal reached further than any decree. In Augsburg, a traveling poet performed a ballad of the trial. In Nuremberg, pamphlets circulated bearing woodcut illustrations of their faces, turned not in despair, but in quiet defiance. Pilgrims began arriving in Munich not only to visit the holy relics, but to walk the square where mercy overcame fear. The Gimpls themselves became an uneasy symbol. Some praised them as innocents sanctified by suffering, others whispered that they had simply been spared to serve political ends. Anna felt the burden of both interpretations. She returned often to the cathedral steps, not to speak, but to listen, watching how people used their story. Once, she found a stranger telling a wide-eyed child that Hansel had spoken with angels. Another time, she overheard two merchants dismiss the trial as spectacle, invented to distract from rising taxes. One evening, Paulus gathered the family beneath the very tree where they had once paused on their way to the Forkhof. He looked to his children, now older in spirit, if not in years. "We do not own the truth," he said softly, "but we are its keepers. What others make of it is theirs to live with. Ours is to remember what it cost." Michael nodded silently, carving a single lion into the bark behind them, a symbol of unity, a mark only they would understand. Humphrey closed his eyes and spoke the names of those still imprisoned, those who had not been as fortunate. And Hansel, now 11, leaned against Anna and asked, "Will people forget?" Anna held him close. "Only if we let them." That night, they lit a single candle at the city's edge. Its flame flickered in the breeze, steady but unguarded, seen only by a few passers-by. But in its glow, a promise took form, not of vengeance nor legend, but of remembrance. For though the scaffold had been dismantled, its shadow lingered, and beneath that shadow, The Gimpls chose to live not as relics of mercy, but as quiet stewards of its meaning. Thus, their story passed from witness to whisper, from record to memory, not with fanfare, but with the slow, resolute rhythm of enduring light. In the decades that followed, Munich did not forget. Though its streets were repaved, and its alleyways widened, the square where the Gimpls once stood was never renamed, yet old-timers still called it the Platz denayed, the Square of Mercy. Children dared each other to touch the weathered stone in the center, said to mark the place where the family had been absolved. Some swore the stone remained warmer than those around it, even in winter. Municipal records showed little. A mention of the trial in the city ledgers, a note of Duke Maximilian's decree in the archives. But in the hearts of the people, especially among those descended from millers, bakers, and midwives, the story lived on. It re-emerged in winter tales and Lenten sermons, woven into folk songs and festival plays. The Gimpl name became shorthand for a steadfastness in the face of cruelty, proof that mercy, once chosen, could alter the course of power. Schools began teaching the episode, not as myth but as caution. Philosophy students debated the case in candlelit lecture halls. Was Maximilian's pardon a sincere act of justice or a masterstroke of political theatre? What does it mean for a ruler to reverse the momentum of accusation? Could fear be unlearned, once embedded so deeply in a city's bones? The clergy, too, found cause for reflection. In later councils, Munich's archbishop cited the Gimpl affair as a turning point.